You rolling? Hi, I'm Timothy Mitchell, the Practical Printer, and welcome to my print lab.
Hi, everybody. My name is Timothy Mitchell, and I am the Practical Printer. In my industry, there are people who are, legends. I mean, people that are widely regarded in the industry as being particularly good at what they do. And sometimes those people step down and retire. One of the things we always want to do at the Practical Printer is to honor those people, to recognize their achievements, their contributions. And one of those people, which I have the honor of having here today, is Scott Hoyt. And Scott is the president of Digital Graphics Executive Recruiting. Hey, Scott, how are you?
Good, sir. How are you? Thanks for doing this.
I'm very well, thank you. There's a ton of people I'm hoping will watch this who have very fine, gainful employment thanks to your efforts. And I also hope there's many people who have businesses in our industry who have employees that are very valuable to them that will watch this and say, hey, that guy helped me out enormously. So I just wanted to say I'm very grateful to have you on the show, and it's a real honor. You're a good man, and you've done great work for the industry for decades.
Timothy, thank you for such kind words. And you too have had a wonderful career. So again, I appreciate you doing this.
Absolutely. Be happy to anytime. So look, it looks like you've officially said you're stepping down. You own your own company. Can you tell me a little bit about the company for people who are not familiar?
Yeah.
What prompted it? What got you into it? And then what is your schedule for stepping away from your business?
Very good. Well, so I'm going to shut this down at the end of this year. I'll still be
Okay.
accessible after that. But why I came into this is I had worked for employers on various rungs of the ladder for about 22 and a half years. I had the great luxury during that time to be involved with at least a dozen product launches, building teams, building distribution networks, mostly for wide format digital color printers, training people, going out in the field and helping sell. And so over that period, the 2 decades plus, I had been contacted so often by other recruiters, most of them never having worked a day in the industry. And I probably helped them place at least 40 or 50 people over that period. And so one day I sat down with my wife and I said, why am I doing that for free? I ought to go into that, especially given the fact that I have a 20 plus year
Sure.
network. And I actually
Yeah,
work
you
for the.
noticed a bottleneck and said, hey, I can do that.
Absolutely. So I did. I opened it up on January 1, 2007. And I told my wife, who fully supported this, I have 6 months to get this right, looking at our savings. And if I don't, I'm going to be begging someone for a job. But it turned out to work out real well. Here we are almost 19 years later, and I've had the great fortune to work with more than 300 companies across 3 continents and place hundreds and hundreds of people, and smartest decision I ever made. So as for
Magnificent.
so as for what I do is the easiest way to describe who I recruit for is if it images to a substrate, I'm in it. So that's wide format digital
Okay.
color printing, grand format, screen, rotary screen, consumer packaging and labeling. What else? Textile printing. Textile, of course, as you know, is gigantic now, probably the number one and fastest growing market in our industry. And
I would
that's what I
agree with
do,
you on that.
anywhere from entry level through executive.
All right. So do you have a particular profile in customers and size of company that you like to work with?
I do. I primarily 95% of the companies I work with are between 5 million and 300 million in annual revenue. And that's by design. It's called time management as far as I'm concerned. Not all big companies are bureaucratic, but so many of them are. And so I don't work with the big
I
boys
would say the
because
default is bureaucratic and the exception is not.
exactly. Just sometimes they're so big, there's so many layers, so many things in the way of politics that they get in the way of themselves, and we just can't get things done. And in this industry, which at one point had an unemployment rate of under 3%, you cannot take 12 steps in 3 months to hire someone if you're looking for the top 5% or 10% of performers. Really, what you want to do is take 3 to 4 steps max, and your time to hire should be no more than a month from the time you post the position. And so those are the types
Okay.
of companies I work with. You're more apt to have it go that way if you're working with the smaller companies.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think sometimes the time it takes for companies to bring someone on board, I almost want to tell them, the guy you're looking to hire is capable and skilled. So if you're going to drag this out for 3 or 4 months, they're already going to find another gig. They're not waiting around. And I think you're missing your windows here. You're just kind of spinning your wheels because you have to be able to be decisive. And then that's why I think guys like you come in, is you're very capable of saying, that's a good fit. His skill set or her skill set is excellent. This would be
Yeah,
a good pairing. Make a decision.
that is very, very true. And we talk about monetizing our businesses. I'm contingency fee only, right? Which means I'm not paid unless I effectively place someone in a position.
Right.
So that that behooves me to work with the companies who are going to move faster, because I'm not on a religious mission. I have to make money in doing this as well.
Right. Yeah, I think your background also, and you know, there's an old thing with when I worked at HP. I read the HP Way, by Dave Packard and Bill Hewlett. And one of the things I think it was Dave Packard was saying is we don't hire any of our. This was a long time ago, right? We don't hire our managers because they went to some school for managing. That won't work at us. You have to be, in a way, promoted from within as a subject matter expert first, and then capable of managing. So you would have to have the inherent respect of the team in order to be promoted up the ladder. And then they would identify people they thought were good managerial candidates based upon their skills in the high degree competency skills in the subset they were working in. You have that knowledge of the industry. You specialized in wide format graphics. So therefore, having you talk to a person and figure out what they're about and what their skill set is and what they'd be good for is a very different experience, I think, than somebody who really is doing this as a job out of college, but actually doesn't know what my industry does, or what different people do in it.
Very true. Very true. So that hopefully is part of my value add, is that I always, of course, interview candidates prior to presenting them. And then when I do, I don't just submit a resume to the employer. I submit the resume, but I also add a bullet point biography, which is my way of going beyond the resume to suggest this is why you really need to talk to this person.
Okay, excellent. Hey, tell me what you think of the state of the industry these days.
It's
To my eye, it seems like in a state of, like, it's just in suspension. Like it just seems like it's not growing. It's not growing at the rate it seemed to be, but there seems to be a lot of changes and consolidation going on. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. It does seem like it's in a state of suspension. Maybe, to me, we reached our pre-COVID peak again, I think around January of last year. That's what I
Okay.
noticed based on the rate of hiring. But it seems like we've turned not terribly south, but a little bit south since then, led by there's less hardware being sold. Most of the hardware being sold is sub $50,000, right? Whether it's solvent or smaller UV printers, and everything else follows, right? If there's not enough hardware being sold, well then the ink, the media, the RIP software follow. And so I don't think it's a terrible turn south, but I notice it's a slight turn south since January of last year.
Sure. Can you attribute some of that to just the longevity of some of the equipment? It seems to me that if I look at some of the printers today and I look at printers of 5 years ago, in certain technology categories, there's not really a huge difference. I mean, I know
That
people in
could
the
be.
3.2 meter dye sublimation game that their printers are old, but they're still chugging along great, and they've had them refurbished over the years and new heads, and they're perfectly happy.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, longevity of equipment could be one reason. Also, if you noticed that there are a lot of used equipment companies popping up, I'm getting
Oh,
emails
sure.
every day, and so you're seeing a lot of that as well. But that is one factor. I'm not sure I can really put my finger on why it's turning slightly south, but I just noticed that equipment buying and hiring have slowed down a little bit since the beginning of last year.
Okay. What do you recommend when you're thinking about salary, both for employees and employers? Insights that you have on that.
Yeah, I could break it down into a few categories. I can tell you what I'm seeing out there. Again, I've worked with over 300 companies in this nearly 19-year period. If you're looking to hire, say, a consumable sales rep, particularly wide format media, your base salary needs to be somewhere between 80 and 90K. That's the average I'm seeing. Your at plan
Okay.
number when you're 100% of quota should be around 120. There should never be a cap on that, right? You want to reward your performers and have
Sure,
commission
100%.
once they're above 100%. On the hardware front, your base salary needs to be between about 80 and 110. Your at plan number needs to be 150. If it's grand format, you need to go a little bit higher than that. And then on the service front, and this is interesting, even though there's less hiring going on, service techs is still an incredible demand. They can almost name their price now. And so I would tell you that if you're looking to hire someone with 3 years or more experience and they're going to be traveling every week, then the base salary better be starting at $80,000 plus time and a half overtime. And if there's no overtime, then the base salary better be between 90 and 100K. And I'm
I
so
couldn't agree
serious
with you
about,
more on that.
yeah, exactly. I'm so serious about it that if they're not there, I won't take the assignment because I know I'm not going to fill it.
Right. Yeah, my view of service in particular is whoever develops the best service team and retains them and can demonstrate that they have very high qualified people in every part of the country, they win. That's who's
Definitely.
going to prevail. Because the similarities within the technology, I think, is very close. The differences between your average UV flatbed printer is not huge. What is important is, can you have essentially zero downtime on a flatbed printer, and can the customer buy from you with a high degree of confidence that there's a guy who's 2 hours away that you can pick up the phone and they're there
Yeah.
and they will get it running and get it going, and that's what they're ultimately going to pay for. That's what they're going. Where their loyalties will
No
lie.
question. And when you think about it, it's smart for the employer to be in the range that I'm talking about, because the difference between hiring someone, say, for 60 or 70K on the service front and say between 80 and 100K is the higher paid person is going to have a much higher rate of first call fix, right? Whereas the lower
Right.
paid person might have to go back a second and a third time. And before you know it,
Right.
now you're spending more money than you would have if you just hired someone at 80, 90, 100K in the first place.
Sure. I also think that the days of just grinding the service people to the nubs is over too, because what's going to happen is they're just going to start looking, and they're going to find a place they can work more regionally, or they're going to find a place that says, yeah, we're going to work you, but you're going to get paid. Do you want the trade-off? Because I think ultimately the days of taking the service people for granted that we'll just find more, no, there aren't anymore. they're they're not there. And nor do I see any meaningful process or intelligence around training people in the service tech industry. And that's my big thing is, how come nobody has any sort of focused training school where you would take somebody out of high school or out back from the military or something and say, hey, there's good money in learning to be a good service tech for the printing companies.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
Seems weird to me that doesn't exist. And that remains one of my little side preoccupations. So if anybody
Right.
has a great idea on how to create a service tech training school that could benefit all of the companies, please look me up. I'm still in on that.
I agree. At one point, Timothy, if I was going to continue to run this business on the service tech front, I almost thought about reaching out to all the tech schools around the country and let them know, hey, there's no charge to them to know me and my business and what I can do, and start training some of these guys from the ground up. Because the other thing we're facing is, and believe me, I'm not age discriminating. I'm an old guy myself, but
Right.
our
No,
service staff is
the techs
starting.
are aging out. A lot
They
of
are.
them are,
They're aging out.
they're hanging in there because they're well paid and they're valuable and they know it. And the company is like, please don't go. We don't know how
Yep.
to replace you exactly.
Yep. Yeah, we need to hand this off to someone, right, for the industry to perpetuate. And I wish we could do more to encourage younger people, Generation Zers and millennials and so forth to come into the industry. And there's largely they're not interested. And I think a lot of it has to do is we're not exactly the highest paying industry. Right? So we have to do something to
No.
start encouraging these people to come in.
Well, I think some of the funding is going to have to move towards higher wages for a lot of the offerings for service, I think is what it comes down to me. And I wanted to ask you about that, and you kind of brought it up on your own, that there's numbers
Right.
you're going to have to hit to have good, competent service people, and they might not be the numbers you had in mind. And then you have to account for, there's been significant inflation since COVID. The prices of living in, like where I live, north of Atlanta, have gone up significantly.
Oh, no question. No question. Now in Southern California, for example, a family of four in Orange County making 85,000, it's something almost considered poverty level.
Sure, absolutely. So let me ask you too, what are some, if you were to give advice to employers, what do they need to focus on during the hiring process? And then contrawise, what would you recommend for employees that they have to
Yes.
keep in mind during the hiring process?
So for employers, I know I mentioned this earlier in the conversation, speed up the process, right? Again, it can't be 12 steps in 3 months. I think our industry unemployment rate, while it's not under 3% now, like it was a couple of years ago, it's still lower than the national average, right? So in that regard, we're pretty healthy. And so if you want those top 5 or 10%ers, then try to keep it to 3 or 4 steps. Try to have the process take no longer than a month from the first conversation with the candidate. And please, please, please don't ghost. Don't take long periods in between steps, because I notice a lot of employers do that. And then you might lose the interest of a top 5 or 10%er. They might say, look, if it's going to take 2-3 weeks in between steps, what's it going to be like when I go to work for the company, right?
Sure.
They may
No, I think that's a fair reflection. You're like, am I going to be mired in bureaucracy trying to do my job too?
Exactly. So, and I'd also say, don't. The only other piece of advice I'd give to employers is don't involve people in the interview process that shouldn't be involved, right? Keep it
Sure.
to HR, keep it to the hiring manager, and maybe a team member that's going to work with that candidate who's hopefully a future employee. So, and then for employees, you asked that question, starting with the resume, right? If you must have an objective, keep it to a couple sentences, no more than that. If you must list your core competencies, keep it to 8 or 10 maximum, 2 columns in a bullet point format. If you're in sales or sales management, by the first third of the first page, you need to go immediately into your career history. You're starting with your present job, going backwards. And if you're in sales or sales management, list your numbers, right? This is so important. So hypothetically, manage 12 people over the Northeast region. And over a 5-year period, we grew the business X% from X dollars to X dollars, right? You'd be surprised how many people don't do that. And most often it's a male, and they've been in the business about 25 to 30 years. And it's a whole bunch of fancy words, a whole bunch of core competencies. And that's all it is for 3 or 4 pages. And 9 times out of 10, that means that salesperson or sales manager hasn't been hitting it. Right, so they're hiding behind something, right? So
yeah,
so
underneath all of that verbiage is, hey, did you hit your numbers? No.
Exactly. And think about it, especially if your numbers are good, right? You want that.
Yeah, you want that number on page 1, item 1, bullet point. Here's my numbers.
Exactly. Because if you think about it, if you're applying to, say, a large company, there might be 300 resumes, submitted for that position, right? And if that's the case, chances are, and especially in a big company, the first person to see that resume might be a HR person that's maybe 2 years into their career, right? And so your resume might end up going to the bottom of the pile when you might be the most qualified person in the pile, right? And so for that reason too, we have to consider AI, right? Now human resource departments have gotten smart. They're using AI to narrow down 300 resumes to 5, just using keywords. So unfortunately, it means you might have to have about 6 different versions of your resume, right? So my advice is read the job description thoroughly, line by line, take notes, and then tailor your resume to that job and using keywords, because you don't want that going to the bottom of the pile after they narrow it down using AI.
Okay. My approach was always, I want to do, my wife and I had disagreements over this. My wife is traditional. She wants to put all this stuff on the resume. And my understanding is I want to do a 1-page, highly focused bullet point resume that somebody who's busy will go yay or nay in about 3 minutes. Right. Like that's all I've got. I've got an elevator. I view a resume as a long elevator pitch, and that's it. And if you can hit it with the elevator pitch on the first resume and it's just right there, they'll call you and ask you for more. And then I thought also, let me ask you about this, because this was a thought I had. Have you ever heard of anybody using video, like an embedded link, as part of the resume process, where like you have one bullet point resume and then you have a link, and the link is a video you made explaining this is who I am, this is what I've done. So you can almost meet them, and that's in the little link, and that's it. 1-page, bullet points, main items, link. Does that make sense, or is that still just too out there?
No, I think it's a wonderful idea. It's going beyond the Call of Duty, right? And I've seen people do that where they'll put a link to which will go over who they are once you hit it. But I've also seen them go to applications, right? So if you're an applications engineer, you might have a link to something you did for the industry, or a graphic artist, might have a link to a gallery of things that they've produced graphics wise, and it's going the extra mile. I think that's an excellent idea, and I have had
Okay.
some people doing it. I'm surprised more people aren't doing it actually.
All right. Yeah, because I thought it was a great idea. My wife's like, no, no, just stick to the way it's done. And you're making yourself, what you're doing is just too unorthodox. And I thought, well, how come nobody's using, the resume seems to be sort of like an artifact of a bygone era, right? There's
Right.
even for me, it's like, look, I even want to put it on LinkedIn or somewhere and just have like if there was a universal agreed upon resume storage site that you could put everything on and just have it there, right? And anyone had access to it, and there it is. But even then, I would still want to refine it to give you everything you need and use technology if necessary to give you visual support of projects that I've worked on or something like that.
Right.
If you're a super high level installer, I'm going to have a whole product overview of the biggest installs that I did.
Yeah, no question. I think that using a link like we're talking about is probably more important for people that are going to be involved in projects with this potential position, or they're an application engineer, or they're a service tech, right? It's easier to show the work that way, whereas a salesperson or a sales manager, like I said earlier, can put their numbers in the resume, right? And you see it right there without having
Perfect. Well, look, I'm going to take my wife out to a very nice drink this evening. I'm going to pour a good glass of wine and I'm going to smile and say, I told you so.
Very good.
Scott Hoyt said that's a good idea. One of the best guys in the industry who would know.
Glad I could help, and I hope she doesn't call me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's not going to go well. Listen, you've published a lot of work. Can you direct me? And I'll put them in the links too. Can you direct me to anything that you have published or have put
Yeah,
through the
yeah.
industry that people
It's
can turn to?
absolutely. It's only a couple of articles, to be honest. So years ago, before it was Printing United, it was SGIA, right? And for SGIA magazine, I published 10 tips for hiring personnel in a sub 3% unemployment industry, and so that went over really, really well. Before that, Sign and Digital Graphics magazine had published 10 tips for hiring sign sales personnel, and it was just those two. I'll be honest, Timothy, they're a little dated by now, but I would say probably 89, 90% of those articles, still apply to today.
Okay. By the way, I love the Archie Griffin jersey in the back. That's great. Is that signed? That looks like it's signed too, isn't it?
It is signed. I idolized him growing up, and on the back wall, I have all kinds of autographed memorabilia from all my heroes. Maybe I'll lose people when I tell them I'm a Raiders and a Mets fan. And but yeah, I
That's
don't
an
think
odd
you can see
combo.
it. You can't see it, but there's a bunch of stuff back there. Kenny Stabler, Marcus Allen, and
Oh, cool.
Mookie Wilson for the Mets, and other people.
Right on.
So yeah.
Excellent. Scott, I know that we will probably have a brief chat again. I know you have somebody in mind that you might, and we don't have to talk about this now, because my next question is, hey, when you exit, and you're going to be here for the rest of the year, focus.
Yeah.
So everyone, if you need this stuff done, if you need people hired, now's the time. Do not waste time.
I am happy to work
One
hard.
of the best guys in the business has a limited time, has a perishable date.
Yeah, so to answer your question, I do have someone in mind. I've already spoken to him. He's a wonderful guy who's been in the recruiting world for about 25 years. It's interesting that we've almost never competed with one another, which is hard to believe, right? Because this is a big industry in terms of dollars to be made, but it's small in terms of the number of people in it. And so he and I have always gotten along. We've actually passed things to each other over the years. And so somewhere in December, I'll announce that, and I'll let everyone know this is the guy you need to work with after I'm gone.
Excellent. Good. Well, I will turn to you when that day comes. Obviously, it's on the way. Again, congratulations on your long and very successful career.
Thank you, sir.
On the founding of your business, on hopefully your profitable and enjoyable retirement. Do you have a hobby that you I know you're a gym rat.
Yeah. My wife and I are both gym rats. Cardio and weights almost every day. We also
Excellent.
take long walks. We hike. I'm a piano player, so I'll spend more time with that. and traveler, right? So we've already started seeing the world since 2019, so we'll continue to do that.
Excellent. All right, my friend, you're always welcome on the Practical Printer. We await your nominee for your heir, and absolutely enjoy your time. Enjoy the round trip. You know, you have one. You get to walk around the bases for the adulation of the crowd for a few more months, and hopefully, I will see you at Printing United. Correct?
Hopefully, yes, sir. I'll hopefully be there for a goodbye tour.
All right, fantastic. You take
Very
care,
good.
Scott. All the best.
Thank you, Timothy. Appreciate it, buddy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.